Well, hello everyone. This is Rona Palmer from eMaint Enterprises, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for this month's Best Practices webinar. And I'm very pleased to have with me today on the line Joe Levitt, who is the president of Springfield Resources, and he's going to be presenting today's topic, the inside scoop on wrench time. And a little introduction for Joel. Joel is a maintenance educator who's trained over 15,000 maintenance leaders from 3,000 organizations in 20 different countries around the globe. And as a matter of fact, due to the wonders of the Internet, Joel is dialing in today from another continent. And since 1980, Joel has also been the president of Springfield Resources, which is a management consulting firm that's developed solutions for clients with a wide variety of maintenance issues. And Joel often speaks at maintenance and engineering conferences, has written over 10 books, and has published about 6 dozen articles on various maintenance topics. And lastly, Joel is and Springfield Resources is the owner of worksample.com and iSampler, which is an iPhone app for work sampling. Joel, are you with me today?
I am with you. How are you doing, Rona?
I'm doing well. And Joel, while people are logging in, because we did have quite a few registrants today, and maybe you can tell us a little bit. I think this is a fairly new venture, worksample.com and the iSampler, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about what prompted you to go in that direction and develop this iPhone app.
Well, we have been using work sampling to determine wrench time since I've been in the field since the early 80s. It's actually been around since 1947. We used to use a device which was just a pager that beeped randomly to initiate the tours for wrench time. And the company that made that went out of business, and I needed something. So I designed, I was, being an iPhone person, I designed an iPhone app to do the work sampling. So that it was really to, so that I could do it easily.
Gotcha. And replace the pagers. Well, I look forward to learning more. And just before, Joel, I turn over the presentation to you, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items with folks on the line today. And I'd like to just let our attendees know that you're in listen-only mode, and we have you on mute. But that's just because we're recording the session today, and we will make the link available to everyone that's on the line to us. And but your phones are on mute, but we do encourage your questions, and Joel has agreed to stay at the end of the session and answer as many questions as we can within our allotted time. So I invite you to please type your questions at any time during the presentation in the questions feature in GoToWebinar, and I'll read them to Joel at the conclusion of his talk. And Joel has also agreed to give everyone a PDF copy of his slides today that he'll share with you personally at the conclusion of the webinar. All right, well, I think that's it for the housekeeping. So, Joel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. I wanted to also tell people that I wanted to share the iPhone app itself to any iPhone users out there. And on the last slide, it'll tell you what to do to get that. But that's I'm real eager to have real people play with it and tell me how they like it or what I can change and what I can make it better. So, and please excuse if you hear traffic noise because I'm in an airport hotel in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. It's 11 o'clock at night, and there seems to be traffic here all the time. So with that, we'll get started with wrench time. Now, before we really get deeply into this, I want to just define what it is that wrench time is. And it doesn't have to just be maintenance. You could use this kind of technology for production workers or engineers or anyone. And wrench time is the productive time. So for our purposes, it's the time each day that your maintenance workers spend directly fixing machines and systems, directly troubleshooting problems, doing PM, and by convention, we've added lockout tagout to the wrench time. Now, you could go either way on this, but I do it by convention because I don't want people to think that they can optimize their maintenance jobs by skimping on their lockout tagout. So before we get started, I have a poll question for you. What do you think right now, what do you think the wrench time is, average per day? So there's 4 categories, and the first category is 5 to 120 minutes, 121 to 168 minutes, 169 to 312, and then should be 313 and up. So Rona, will you run a poll?
You bet. So we've just launched the poll. It's now open. And if you wouldn't mind just typing directly into your keyboards and let us know, what do you think your wrench time, your actual time spent on tools is right now? Is it 1 to 25%, 26 to 35, 36 to 65, or above 66%? So it looks like we've had about 3/4 of the votes in. So let me keep this open for a few more seconds so everyone can cast their votes. Okay. All right. Oh, a few more people are still logging in. Again, let us know what you think your current actual time on tools wrench time is at the moment. All right, good. We have over 90%, so I'm going to go ahead and close this and share the results. And Joel, what our attendees today have told us, 21% have said they think it's 25% or less. 44% have said it's somewhere between 26 and 35%. 31% of the attendees, a little over 30%, think it's from 36 to 65. And about 5% think it's over 66%. All right, so thanks everybody for your feedback.
Great, so that's interesting. Now, I want you to think about whatever you said it was. If you subtract that number from 480, you have the pool of time that all of your work will help create more wrench time from. In other words, the pool of time available for improvement is going to come primarily from the non-wrench time. I want to look at this another way, and that is, let's dissect or look at the anatomy of a typical maintenance job. You know, this is, I'm not talking about people hiding. I'm not talking about people being lazy. I'm talking about the real, you know, on the ground situation. So a typical maintenance job, the first thing that happens is you get a job assignment. I'm going to say you obtain a permit and lock out and tag out the equipment. You may actually collect your tools and parts. Now that I think about it, you may do that before you do the lockout. You're then going to transport the tools and materials to the job, and that may take more than one trip, particularly if you forget something. When you get to the job, you're supposed to do a quick safety walk down to make sure that there's no hazards that have been introduced since the job was planned. Then we actually do the work, I mean the actual work content. Now you'll notice that's the only one that has a D, meaning it's a direct activity. all the rest of them have I's, meaning they're indirect activities. We finish the job and release the permit. We might get a test permit, so we might do a temporary unlock to test it, and then we return the unit to operations. Now, I'm sure your guys are there cleaning up the work area and following the rule that they always leave the work area cleaner than it was when they got there, I hope. We're going to now travel back to the maintenance shop. We're going to return tools and excess materials. Then we're going to do our paperwork and close, do our work order and write our closing comments. So as you see this, each of these areas are areas where, you still have to do this, but, you may have, some people are saying they have 50% wrench time and 50% doing all these other things. Now, what work sampling is we translate the individual job activities into a full day to see how people spend their time. And what we're looking at is specific actions on the ground and in the shop. And it doesn't matter what field you're in. There's both indirect and direct activities. So, people talking, no matter what the content of the conversation, is always going to be indirect. People working on an asset or doing direct diagnostic work is always going to be direct activity. Now, what's funny here is that within direct activity, I'm not saying that the person's even doing the right job. I'm also not saying that they're doing the job correctly. I'm just saying that they're doing a work content of the job. So it's, when you start to really get down to productivity, you can see that even wrench time, there's some openings for more productivity improvement. So work sampling is like we were a fly on the wall. And if we weren't a fly on the wall and we took pictures of the maintenance work area and we took pictures randomly, what will we find? Well, 1 minute you can see the guys, all standing around talking, and literally they could be conversing about the job. They could also be conversing about virtually anything. A minute later or 2 minutes later, it could be that everybody will be working. So it would be an entirely different story. And what we would want to do is do this like little snapshot over and over again, randomly throughout the day, and then start to tabulate the numbers we get. So we string together a bunch of the observations, and if we follow some rules, we'll start to have some analyzable information. It might look something like this. So we would have every person we catch working, we would put a check mark down or a tally mark. And then, we might walk by the parts area and count the number of people that are, in front of the parts area each time we do this. We might look at how many people are getting instructions, how many people are moving. If this was a fleet, they might be driving the unit into the work bay. And then there's always going to be a category for missing in action. And they're not necessarily missing, they're just, you just didn't see them. But in any analysis, missing in action is going to be, one of your bigger things. And, you'll just add that to the analysis. So you make your tours, and you make them a particular way. and you put it onto the tally sheet. We make our observations fairly, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. We make our observations randomly. We need to make enough observations for the process to be statistically valid, and we'll go over that. We want to translate the observation into percentages. So what we're saying is if I have 1,000 observations and say 400 of them are in the category of direct or working, then I would say that 40% of the time in this shop people are working. Then I would say I translate the percentages into minutes, and I would say, well, what's 40% times 480 minutes? So that's, 160. Probably my math is wrong. 40% of 480. Well, whatever that is. What we would say is you would be able to say with some certainty and some accuracy what your people spend their time on. So that's the conclusion is saying with some certainty and some accuracy what your people are spending their time on. Now, some of the rules, I mentioned the word fairly, and it's important to capture what the person was doing at the instant of the observation and not what he just finished or was about to do. So what we say is that you don't want to anticipate what the person's going to do. You want to capture what they're doing at the moment. And I have a scientific picture here of a baby, as you can see. She's not eating right now. She may have just finished or may be starting, but right now she's not eating. So if we were doing work sampling on baby eating, this would not count as a baby eating. This would count as the baby sitting there. Now, randomly has, it has a very intense mathematical definition. What we're using, the method of selection where the probability of choosing a specific item is the proportion of those items in the population. So for us, any 1 minute is just as likely for the observation as any other minute. So, a particular minute, we would initiate a tour of the maintenance shop on a particular minute, and then some random time later, we would do another tour of the shop. And a tour is just walking a route through the shop and looking at every single maintenance worker and then instantly recording what you see they're doing at the time you walk by them. And it's literally, you could either memorize what they're doing and then make the check marks later, or make the check marks right then. Now, this random observation is something that supervisors do unconsciously. They do non-random sampling, non-random, because the supervisor will always be looking to see who's working and who's not working, and in order to manage their shop. So that's a little bit different because one, it's not random, and two, they're mostly looking to sort people out. I say that most of the barriers to productivity are actually kind of put in place by management or by the choices management has made, and I'll go into that in a second. Now, we use the observation frequency as mean time between observations, or we say mean time between beeps because our little iPhone thing beeps when you're supposed to make your tour. Now, I'm not going to get into the arithmetic of this, but there's a couple things that you need to know. One is that there's a margin of error, and we might accept a 2% margin of error. This is something you see very often on, our presidential polls that we read every day that say this, one thing is happening or another thing is happening. Well, if you read the bottom under the poll, you'll see, this poll has a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. So what we've done is we've designed what's called a nomograph. And if you go to the website, it's a free thing, where you just click on the percentages that you need to click on. It explains it, and it then does that little piece of arithmetic and calculates the number of observations. So in this case, in order to get a 2% accuracy, in this case we need 771 observations. Now, that sounds like it's a huge amount of work, but remember, it's the number of tours times the number of people equals the number of observations. So if you're observing a 10-person shop, each tour gives you 10 observations, whether the people are there or not. So the number of observations tends to go up pretty quickly. Now, this is data from an actual maintenance. It's actually several maintenance departments aggregated. And I'd just like to spend a minute or two looking at this and seeing what it means. Typical maintenance worker is spending so much time doing these indirect activities. So receiving instructions, they're actually spending, we caught 50 observations of people receiving instructions over the period of the study. Now these studies usually take a couple weeks, and then it means that you'll be doing a couple tours a day, walking through the maintenance shop. Now you can certainly do other things on the tour, so it's not completely, the time is not completely made up of that. Obtaining tools and materials, they found people are spending about 12% of their time, where we're standing at the tool room, we're looking for materials, we're standing at the warehouse desk, we're gathering things, trying to find a lift, and then we're spending 15% of our time on travel to and from the job. And it could be a couple of trips, it could be we get stuff, we go start the job, and then halfway through we realize we don't have something, so we'll go back and go forward. We have what are called coordination delays. This is where we observe the person waiting, but we could tell that they were waiting for something, and it could be they're waiting for an electrician if they're a mechanic. It could be that they're waiting for a crane to move something. It could be if they're waiting for operations on something. So coordination delays are where we're waiting for a different group to do something. And then we have a couple things idle at the job site, for example, where we observe people, they're at the job, but they're not doing anything. So there we have, again, 24 minutes, or 5%. We also have the guys called late starts and early quits, where it takes them a little while to get going in the morning. You know, you have people that, you know, it takes them a couple minutes to get out of the maintenance shop, and they're the first ones back into the shop at the end of the day. So late starts and early quits is another 5%. Authorized breaks and relief, that's you know, your meal breaks, your authorized coffee breaks, your authorized cleanup time, things like that. And then excess personal time. Now, this was done before texting became so popular. So, gosh, you know, it could be a much higher number now. But we had 50 observations of people taking excess personal time. So now, as you look at this, out of a 480-minute day, this is the pool of time we can have an impact on. And, you know, things like giving somebody a job plan that has all the tools and materials on it, you know, would dramatically lower the time it took to obtain the tools and to travel. You know, we might save 1 or 2 trips. Coordination delays can frequently be changed by scheduling the other resources that you would normally wait for. But this is where your opportunities are. When you start to look at your indirect time, you start to see, like, oh my, this is like 72 minutes of travel. Well, maybe we should, you know, get another pickup truck. I've literally seen people spend huge amounts of time because there was a department that drove everybody around in this one plant, like a transportation department. So mechanics would actually wait for a truck to pick them up. Now, when we looked at this, the waiting would pay for, I mean, they were using up 2 or 3 people's time waiting for the truck. So, you know, if they could just jump in the truck and go, it would actually be much, much more efficient. So here's the question. You know, how can you do this? How can we do this work sampling? Work sampling is, of all the things that somebody could do, it's very, very straightforward to do it. The first step is to make a list of all the activities that are going on in our shop. And this would include the direct activities like working on a machine, to the indirect activities like getting parts, traveling to and from the asset and to and from the storeroom and the tool crib. Just like the things we just looked at, the excess personal time, computer work, getting tools, whatever activities. You don't have to have a complete list. What you want to be looking at are those activities that you're interested in studying. So the other ones you can just, you know, gather in one category. Now this is called a template. And if you're doing work sampling, you might have a template for maintenance, another template for operations, and another one for your security force and clerical and engineering. Each job title would have its own activity list or its own template. Next thing is to design tours through the shop, and the route should take you through all the places you expect to find maintenance people working in your facility. You can have several routes. It's good to have different routes and do different routes because it helps the randomness. You want to be coming in from the left and sometimes coming in from the right. I have to say, we always want to be telling people what we're doing when we do a work sampling study. And in fact, the first one that I did with that little pager I was telling you about, I actually didn't conduct the survey myself. I actually had the maintenance trade people do the survey themselves. Like, they carried the pager for a couple of days, and they would note what happened when the thing beeped. And it was very interesting because we got similar results than we would expect if I had done it, because I also did it. So we're not really measuring people, we're really measuring the system that you have to get work done. And remember, the number of observation is the number of tours times the people present. So you'll have decent statistics in a couple weeks. Now, the logical question you could ask is, why would you do this? Why would you go through this? And the answer is, simply, inappropriate levels of indirect activity are barriers to productivity. Now, I say inappropriate. What I mean is that there are levels of indirect activity you want them to do. In other words, filling out a work order is something you want people to do. So a certain amount of time allocated for your work orders is completely appropriate. But if you find that people are spending an hour a day doing their paperwork, that would be an inappropriate level of indirect activity and needs to be studied closer to see why it's taking so long. Again, your warehouse, you are going to spend some time getting parts no matter how you have it organized. But if it's an hour and 45 minutes a day, which it was at one place, then there's a problem with the way your parts is set up, a business problem. So what we want to do is examine all the instances of indirect activity and look for ways to optimize. And like I've been saying, in some places, the really big problem is down at the bottom, seeking drawings. People spend inordinate amounts of time, looking for drawings. So that's like, kind of crazy, but maybe some way to make that quicker. Other places have their mechanics source parts, like literally go on the internet and find parts, and they may be spending hours a day doing that. And setting people up to do that is an invitation to have people update their Facebook page and other things. So we want to look at what we're asking people to do. Now, our second poll question, Rona, is right now, can you see areas where there's excess indirect time being burnt? Okay, so that's the poll question.
All right, well,
so that would be a yes or no.
Just gone ahead and launched it. Yep, we have a yes, no. If everyone wants to type in their responses. Can you right now see areas where you may have excessive indirect time? Yes, no, or I could give you a third option is don't know. All right, looks like we have about 70% of the vote in. We'll give them a few more seconds. Let everybody finish giving their responses. Okay, let's go through and close this and share the results. So, I guess this is good news, but it looks like 92%, Joel, of our attendees today said yes, they can right now see areas of excessive indirect time, and then 3% said no, and 5% weren't sure. Okay,
Great.
So over 90% found some opportunities. Back to you.
Now, I have a follow-up question, another poll. And that is, just from what we discussed, without actually doing work sampling, could you see an intervention that would mitigate the activity you just saw that was excessive?
Okay, so let's ask that question right now, if you don't mind typing in your response. You all said you found opportunities. Can you think of something that you can do to make an improvement in that indirect time, or what might be excessive indirect time? All right, we have about half of the votes in. again, let us know. Can you see something you can do right now to improve or offset or mitigate the activity that is being the barrier to productivity? All right, looks like we have about 3/4 in, about 5 more seconds. Okay, let's share the results. Well, 86% said they could find a solution, Joe. They could see an intervention that would mitigate that activity. 5% said no, and 8% weren't sure. So not quite as high a number as those who could find the opportunities. All right, turning it back to you.
That's, I mean, if you think about, just think about that to yourself. That is a remarkable thing, that everybody sees that their business process has excess of indirect time, and that 86% or 80% even could see that there is a way to intervene. Is, I mean, it's remarkable, because, you know, we could do an intervention and pick up 10 minutes a day. Now, that sounds like, you know, virtually nothing, except for one thing. A typical maintenance department does maintenance work about 157 minutes a day. So 10% is a 7% increase in productivity. So that's awesome. You know, that's really good. And to the extent you can intervene, you have a shot at influencing wrench time. The way we influence wrench time is we remove the barriers from wrench time. You could use Michelangelo's example. He didn't sculpt, you know, the sculpture David or the Pietà. He didn't sculpt that. What he did was he removed the rock that wasn't that. So if you remove the time that's not wrench time, the indirect time, you have a shot at increasing the wrench time and making things run more efficiently. Now, the other thing that happens when you do this is you'll find that people's morale will go up because there's less waste and they can be more effective. Most of your people would love to be more effective and get very frustrated by your systems, your barriers to productivity. So it's very interesting that, you know, we all think that workers want to get out of work, but the truth is a lot of your workers would just like to work and not have to chase stuff down to get their job done. So that, my friends, is the inside story of wrench time. So I want to thank you for your attention. And I said, if anybody would like to test a free copy of iSampler, just send me a message what you want to do with it at jdl@maintrainer, and I forgot to put the .com in. So thank you very much, and we want to type in questions. If you're interested in any kind of questions about this, I'd be happy to answer them.